Melly had his first court hearing today for his upcoming trial, scheduled for September. The new judge was stunned upon reviewing how long Melly had been sitting in jail without a conviction. As Melly entered the courtroom, he seemed visibly irritated, sporting a new hairstyle. His anger was justified, but more on that later. The judge began reading through the case files, but when he reached the part detailing Melly's jail time, he was shocked. The report stated that Melly had been incarcerated for a staggering 2,159 days, a fact that left both the judge and Melly himself surprised. The judge took a moment to process the information and then raised an important question. Mr. Dion's has to make an informed decision about who he wants as his lawyers. He's been sitting in jail for 2,159 days. How long would you like to have to make this decision? The judge clarified that he couldn't determine when the investigation would be over, as that was up to the sheriff's office. However, he requested that Melly make a decision by the next day, even reserving time in court to finalize the decision. The judge's disbelief at the length of Melly's detention was palpable, and he issued a directive. Give us your final reason why he shouldn't be free by tomorrow, or I'm releasing him on bond. This was exactly what Melly needed, a new judge who wouldn't simply side with the prosecutors. In an effort to strengthen Melly's case, his lawyers presented evidence from the original trial. They referenced a text message Melly sent to his ex-girlfriend when the crime occurred, while he was reportedly running away from men on the street. In the messages, Melly claimed that he was being chased by a car with rival gang members in it. His ex-girlfriend asked if he was okay, and he responded, describing the car approaching from behind and suggesting he was in hiding. This piece of evidence seemed to support the idea that Melly had been pursued by members of a rival group. But there was more. The original trial prosecutors had admitted there was no firearm found in the vehicle, which significantly weakened their case. This discrepancy raised questions about the nature of the crime and the lack of physical evidence to support the charges. The situation surrounding Melly's release became even more complicated when his defense team pointed out that the feds had been treating him unfairly. According to reports, Melly's mother was suing the Broward Sheriff's Office for the cruel treatment her son had endured while in custody. She claimed that for the past 3 years, Melly had been denied contact with any family members, had been unable to use a phone, and had not been allowed to receive or read his mail. Melly's mother expressed her frustration, noting that even other inmates who had been convicted of crimes were afforded basic rights, like the ability to write letters or receive mail. Despite this, some individuals expressed less sympathy for Melly. For example, Charleston White, a controversial figure, voiced his opinion that Melly deserved to be mistreated. He argued that once someone takes a life, they lose the right to complain about mistreatment. This comment angered Melly's mother, who became emotional when discussing the lack of humanity shown to her son. She described how heartbreaking it was to see her son's emotional pain and fears for his safety, stating that the Broward Sheriff's Office needed to be investigated for their actions. Boozy, another figure in the public eye, also weighed in on the situation, expressing sympathy for Melly's mother's struggles. He remarked that it was clear she was under significant stress, and he reached out to offer support. This public response highlighted the deep emotional toll that Melly's ongoing legal battle was taking on his family. Meanwhile, the feds retaliated by submitting a 6-page file detailing evidence they believed justified Melly's continued incarceration. The most critical new piece of evidence they presented was a motive for the crime. It was revealed that Melly had been close with rapper King Von before his arrest. According to reports, a member of A Block shared a secret about Melly's relationship with Von. Apparently, Melly had sought advice from King Von on how to handle a situation with 2 individuals, Sack Chaser and Juvie. The 2 men were allegedly attempting to extort Melly for a share of the money he had earned from his business activities, which included performing concerts, selling merchandise, and promoting companies. However, Sack Chaser and Juvie were not involved in the work and wanted a cut of the profits anyway. This financial dispute was a critical factor in the case, as it offered a possible motive for the crime. According to the prosecutors, King Von had warned Melly about the situation and suggested a course of action. This added a new layer to the case, showing that there was more at play than just a random act of violence. Melly's own text messages, sent shortly after the crime, also seemed to add weight to this new narrative. In one message, Melly admitted to his involvement in the crime and added a smiley face emoji, which seemed to suggest he was either trying to downplay the seriousness of the situation or attempting to mask his emotions. Additionally, a video from a Facebook live stream surfaced, showing Melly and his associates shortly after the crime. The video depicted Melly in a surprisingly upbeat mood, as he appeared to be celebrating and maintaining a positive attitude despite the events of the early morning. This behavior seemed out of place, especially given the gravity of the situation, and it only added more complexity to the case. The lead prosecutor then turned to the physical evidence in the case, focusing on the Jeep the victims were driving. Sergeant Williams testified that the crime could not have been a drive-by, as initially suggested. He revealed that only 3 rounds were fired from inside the vehicle, and there were no signs of gunfire coming from outside. This contradicted earlier theories about the nature of the attack, as it became evident that the crime occurred within the car. Further testimony came from Juvie's mother, who identified the individuals involved in the shooting. She confirmed that her son had been in the back seat of the Jeep and recognized the other individuals involved. This testimony reinforced the idea that Melly had been part of a calculated, targeted attack. To complicate matters further, Melly's co-defendant, YNW Borland, was arrested and charged with witness tampering. According to the charges, Borland had been involved in misleading a witness in an attempt to influence their testimony. This new development caused even more tension in the case, as it seemed to indicate that both Melly and Borland were involved in efforts to prevent crucial testimony from being heard. As more charges were filed against both Melly and Borland, it became clear that the case was far from over. Melly faced multiple new charges, including tampering with a witness and conspiracy to commit tampering. The charges carried serious consequences, including life imprisonment if there were convictions. The situation worsened when Borland was accused of attempting to influence jurors in the case, with a report detailing how he had allegedly kept notes about jurors' appearances and seating positions. This scandalous development was seen as a major misstep on Borland's part, and it only served to complicate the legal proceedings for both men. Despite these ongoing legal challenges, Melly's defense team remained hopeful. They presented arguments to counter the evidence provided by the prosecution, asserting that the retrial would not happen for a long time. The retrial was scheduled for September 2025, which would give Melly more time in jail before his case was heard again. Outside the courthouse, Melly's mother provided an update, confirming the new trial date and expressing hope that her son would eventually be released. However, the conditions of Melly's incarceration remained harsh. He was reportedly being held in solitary confinement, with no contact allowed with other inmates. This situation only seemed to fuel the growing concerns about the treatment of Melly in custody. Melly's family continued to speak out, pushing for an end to his mistreatment and demanding that he be granted a fair trial. The fight for Melly's release seemed far from over, and it was clear that both legal and personal battles were far from reaching their conclusion. As the legal proceedings continue, it remains to be seen how the case will unfold. Will the new evidence from the prosecution stand up in court? Will Melly's defense team be able to secure his release before the retrial? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. The saga of YNW Melly's legal battle is far from over, and it continues to captivate the public's attention.